the city had laughed. Not joyfully, not freely, but bitterly, like a wound laughing at the knife that made it. After the scaffold, after the grandmother's defiance and the dockworker's final scream, the laughter spread from rooftops to alleys, bowls clanging like cymbals in the night. For a single evening, silence cracked. Cole's silver bell tolled in vain, each flawless chime drowned beneath the jagged rhythm of the city mocking him. The parish, still half in rubble, pulsed with a kind of fevered hope. But morning came. And with it, boots. It began at the north gate. Deserters watching from the shadows saw the first armored trucks roll in, not for supplies, not for raids. They carried steel fencing, barbed coils, prefab watchtowers painted the pale gray of prison walls. By midday, the plaza where children had once laid bowls in neat lines had become a construction site. Wardens in black armor hammered pylons into the stone, their visors blank. Families were herded to the edges, forced to watch as their square turned into a cage. By nightfall, the stability enclosure stretched 3 blocks. Floodlights burned white across the rooftops, illuminating every crack, every doorway. Inside, tents sprouted like metal flowers, each marked with the sunburst emblem. A new law flickered across Cole's propaganda screens. Noise is treason. Curfew at dusk. Order is survival. The laughter of the night before choked in throats. Jonah watched from the parish roof with Carla and Naya. Smoke from burned-out markets still smeared the horizon. They turned a square into a camp in less than a day, Carla muttered, eyes fixed through a cracked lens. Steel delivered, fences up, lights burning. This isn't policing. This is occupation. Naya's grip on her crutch whitened. They laughed once, so he'll make sure they never laugh again. Jonah said nothing. His hand rested on the ledger tucked under his coat. Last night, the city had felt alive, if only for a breath. Now it looked more caged than ever. And joined them, silent as usual, her gray coat blending with dusk. She nodded toward the floodlit enclosure. He's planting the iron hand. Soft masks are gone. From now on, it's steel. That night, Cole himself appeared on every screen. No more gentle fatherly tone. His words cut like a drill sergeant's bark. You laughed. You told. You mocked stability. No more. From this day forward, your streets belong to order. Wardens will guard you, feed you, protect you. Obey, and you will live. Resist, and you will starve. There will be no second laughter. Behind him, cameras showed the enclosure glowing bright in the night. Rows of families already herded inside, their bowls confiscated at the gates. Children clutched empty hands where metal had once been. Cole's face froze into a steel mask on the screens, unblinking. Inside the parish, the reaction split like bone under pressure. Some cheered bitterly, at least there's food in the enclosure. Others cursed, it's a prison. Once inside, you won't leave. Arguments erupted. Bowls slammed on stone. Mothers screamed at deserters to fight back. Deserters shouted they weren't an army. Jonah climbed onto the broken altar, ledger in hand. The room quieted, dozens of eyes burning into him. Last night, you laughed, he said, voice raw. You laughed at the scaffold. You laughed at the lie. That laughter was ours. He can build fences, flood us with light, chain every bowl, but he cannot unhear it. The iron hand is fear of your laughter. Remember that. But as he closed the ledger, he knew memory wasn't enough. The city needed more than words. The event that burned itself into history came 3 nights later. A group of children, some who had marched with bowls before, slipped through alleys and climbed the fence of the new enclosure. Inside, they found stacks of confiscated bowls piled like scrap metal beside the warden's tents. One boy, no older than 10, climbed atop the pile. He struck 2 bowls together, the clang sharp as the bell's ghost. Others followed, banging bowls like drums, their rhythm rolling across the camp. Floodlights snapped toward them. Wardens shouted, rifles raised. But the sound carried into the streets outside. Families looked up from their curfew cages. Deserters froze mid-step. The clang spread, bowls answering bowls, windowsills answering rooftops. For one moment, the enclosure was not prison, but stage. Until the first shot cracked. Jonah heard it from the parish. The clang cut short, replaced by screams. The drone Carla had rigged above the enclosure streamed everything: a boy falling from the pile, his bowl rolling across stone, blood chasing after. The city gasped. Cole's voice thundered over loudspeakers, "Noise is treason." But the people had already heard treason sound. That single shot became the spark of Chapter 3. The laughter had ended, yes. But now the city knew the price of silence. And silence was heavier than steel. The boy's bowl rolled across the stone like a bell clapper gone astray, its hollow clang echoing far beyond the enclosure. Families pressed against the fences, their cries swallowed by floodlights and rifles. Jonah watched through Carla's drone feed, fists trembling. "They shot a child," he whispered, as if saying it aloud would carve it deeper into the world. Naya slammed her crutch against the nave floor. "This is no longer occupation. It's slaughter." Anne's face was unreadable. "No, it is theater again. Cole makes murder into warning." By morning, Cole's broadcasts spun the blood into script. Mercer incited this. Children became pawns of chaos. Order defends itself. On screens, the boy was never shown falling. Only bowls clashing, spliced with images of fires in the ash markets. His name was never spoken. But the city had seen. They had heard. At the parish, the mood cracked. Mothers demanded revenge. Fathers argued for caution. Some begged Jonah to surrender himself to save others. Carla snapped, eyes burning from sleepless nights, "If we hand him over, Cole will still burn us." "This isn't about Jonah, it's about silence." Jonah opened the ledger. The page seemed heavier than lead. Slowly, he wrote. "The boy with the bowl. Shot at the fence." Noise became blood. The ink bled into the paper, stark as a wound. He closed the book with shaking hands. "We cannot match Cole's iron with iron. But we can make every bullet echo louder than his bells." That night, bowls rang again, softer, hidden in kitchens, tapped against stone hearths. Not loud enough for wardens to call treason. Just enough to remind each other the child sound lived on. It was not laughter anymore. It was mourning turned into rhythm. And it was the rhythm that would carry Chapter 3 forward. The day after the boy fell, the streets no longer belonged to the city. They belonged to steel. Wardens of stability poured in by the hundreds, black armor polished like mirrors, helmets smooth and faceless, boots pounding the stones in a rhythm that drowned the bowls. Trucks rolled through every gate, their sides painted with Cole's sunburst emblem, cannons mounted where lanterns once hung. Families peered from windows only to be blinded by new floodlights. Loudspeakers barked orders. Curfew begins at dusk. All noise is treason. All bowls must be surrendered. Every corner became a checkpoint. Barbed wire cut alleys into cages. Streets where children once marched with bowls now bristled with barricades and rifles. It was no longer a city. It was a barracks. Jonah, Carla, and Naya moved through shadows, slipping past patrols. The air smelled of oil and gunmetal. Every warden carried not just weapons, but stacks of stability tokens, small iron discs stamped with Cole's emblem. "No token, no bread," Carla muttered, spying the distribution lines. Families stood in silence, bowls confiscated, waiting for rations. Each token bought one half-loaf. Naya clenched her teeth. So now hunger has a price tag. Anne's gaze was ice. Not a price. A leash. At the third checkpoint, a girl no older than 12 tried to hide her bowl under her coat. A warden spotted the curve of metal, yanked it free, and hurled it into a pile of confiscated bowls that clanged like a graveyard. "Noise is treason," the soldier barked. The girl whimpered, "It's not noise, it's my mother's." The visor turned toward her. The rifle lifted. Jonah stepped forward before he could stop himself, ledger heavy under his coat. He felt Anne's grip on his arm, iron strong. "Not now," she hissed. The warden shoved the girl into the ration line, leaving the bowl buried in the pile. She looked back once, eyes hollow. Jonah's fingers ached around the ledger's spine. He wanted to write her name, but didn't even know it. All he had was the echo of her bowl striking others. Cole's voice filled the streets that night, projected from every screen. "You mistook laughter for strength. You mistook noise for freedom. But steel does not laugh, and steel does not bend. From this night forward, stability is your only bread. Obey, and live. Resist, and starve." Behind his words, images showed, neat rows of families receiving loaves, wardens standing tall, confiscated bowls stacked into mountains. Carefully edited. No fear. No blood. The iron hand had revealed itself, and it glittered under floodlights. In the parish, the mood broke again. Families whispered of surrender. If Jonah gave himself up, maybe the checkpoints would fall, maybe the bowls would be returned. Carla slammed her fist into the altar, sparks flying from her transmitter. "Don't you see? He doesn't want Jonah. He wants silence. Even if Jonah dies, he'll still build walls, still take bowls." Naya's voice was thunder. "Then we tear his walls down." But Anne's voice cut through like cold steel. "Walls are not built to be torn. They are built to choke. To fight them, you must not strike the stone, you must poison the mortar." Her eyes locked on Jonah. "Find the weakness. Find the crack. Then you write it." That night, deserters smuggled news. The warden's headquarters had been built inside the enclosure, but their barracks stretched outward like veins. And in those barracks, wardens ate fresh bread, drank clean water, while the city withered. Jonah listened in silence. His hand traced the rook in his pocket, edges cutting his palm. Straight lines. No curves. Yet every street outside was a curve of wire and steel. He opened the ledger. Slowly, he wrote. Steel in the streets. Bowls in the piles. Bread behind gates. The ink bled heavy. The parish watched him, waiting for orders he didn't have. Finally, Jonah closed the book. "Tomorrow, we look into the barracks. If he feeds them while starving us, we'll show the city. If he denies even them, then he is weaker than he claims." Carla nodded, her fingers twitching over wires. "Then I'll get us eyes inside." Naya leaned on her crutch, eyes burning. "And I'll be ready when the gates fall." And only whispered, almost to herself, "Steel bends not to fire, but to rust. Let us see what rust looks like." Outside, the city slept under floodlights. Bowls were gone. Bread had become iron. And the streets echoed with the rhythm of boots, not laughter. The barracks stank of meat. Not the rot of hunger rotting in bellies, not the faint smell of burned bread crust that haunted the markets. This was heavy, greasy, cloying, pork fat sizzling, bread crust golden and thick, broth bubbling in iron kettles. Jonah crouched on a rooftop beam with Carla and Anne, watching through a cracked skylight. Naya waited below in the alley, crutch ready, watching their backs. Inside the barracks hall, wardens laughed. Not the bitter laugh of citizens mocking scaffold lies, but full, rich belly laughs. They tore hunks of bread and dunked them into steaming bowls, mugs of beer sloshing. Carla's drone hovered silently in the rafters, its lens whirring. The image streamed to her rig strapped across her chest. She whispered, "Do you see it? Every ration they starve outside, here, it's feast." Jonah's throat clenched. He remembered the 12-year-old girl, her mother's bowl stripped away, shoved into a line for half a loaf. He remembered the boy at the enclosure, shot for striking a clang. And here, mugs raised, crumbs flying. And leaned closer, her voice flat as always. "Excess is the weakness. Steel bends under rust, and gluttony is rust." Jonah swallowed hard. If the city saw this. Carla's fingers danced across her controls. "They will. I'll splice the feed into his propaganda stream. Let them see their protectors drown in soup while they starve. But Anne's hand caught hers. Not yet. A single leak, and Cole will claim fabrication. We need proof so heavy it crushes his edits. Carla's jaw tightened. Proof is right there. Not enough, Anne hissed. We need more. Stockpiles. Ledgers. The crates he swears are empty but here are full. Jonah's grip tightened on the real ledger. The ink from last night's entry still stained his fingers. Steel in the streets. Bowls in the piles. Bread behind gates. He knew she was right. One feast shown could be staged. But 1,000 loaves hidden, that was unspinnable. Suddenly, a door slammed below. Wardens dragged in 2 prisoners, civilians caught past curfew. A man and a woman, gaunt and terrified. The commander, broad-shouldered, visor lifted to reveal a scarred jaw, shoved them to their knees. He tore a loaf in half, letting crumbs scatter across the floor. You want bread? His voice was a sneer. Noise buys you nothing. Silence buys you half. The woman whimpered, reaching. The commander dropped the loaf into mud, ground it beneath his boot, then waved his men away. Laughter shook the hall. Bowls banged, not in hunger, but as toast. Jonah's chest burned. He wanted to scream, to leap through the skylight, ledger in hand, write every name of every man below until the ink drowned them. Anne's hand on his shoulder stopped him cold. Not now. We gather. Then we strike. Carla's drone zoomed close, capturing the commander's face, the crushed loaf beneath his boot, the prisoners sobbing. She whispered, "This will be enough." No, Anne repeated. This is only the beginning. Back in the parish, the footage played across the nave. Families gasped, cried, cursed. A mother clutched her child's shoulders. They told us bread was gone. A father's voice shook with rage. And here they drown in it. Arguments flared again, some demanded immediate revolt, storming the barracks with knives and bowls. Others trembled, whispering, Cole will kill 10 for every loaf we see. Jonah opened the ledger in the middle of the uproar. He wrote, bread behind gates. Silence buys half. Noise buys blood. The words seared into the page. He closed the book and faced them. Cole builds his iron on lies. We show the truth, and his steel begins to rust. Carla lifted her transmitter high. Tomorrow, they see what we saw tonight. Naya slammed her crutch into the floor. And when they've seen enough, they'll march again. Not with bowls this time, with fire. And said nothing, her eyes locked on Jonah. In her silence lay both warning and challenge. That night, as the city crouched under curfew, a soft sound began in kitchens and alleys. Not bowls this time, wooden spoons stirring empty pots, imitating the clang of bowls, quiet enough to pass beneath the warden's ears. The sound spread like a rumor, like rust eating steel. Jonah sat awake with the ledger open on his lap, listening. For the first time since the boy's death, he let himself breathe. Steel filled the streets. But silence had found its crack. The video hit the streets at dawn. Screens meant for Cole's sermons suddenly flickered, and instead of his silver bell or calm face, the city saw soldiers feasting. They saw wardens lifting mugs of beer, tearing loaves in half, broth dripping down beards. They saw the scarred commander grinding bread beneath his boot while prisoners wept. For 5 minutes, silence reigned in every square. Then the shouting began. At first, disbelief. Mothers covering their mouths. Fathers shaking their heads. Then rage. In the East Quarter, families hurled stones at ration trucks. In the South Docks, bowls were slammed on the pavement until they bent, dents ringing like cracked bells. Children shouted through alleys, bread behind gates. Bread behind gates. Cole's broadcasts tried to cut in, but Carla's splice looped endlessly. No matter how many times his technicians jammed the feed, the image of wardens drinking and laughing forced its way back. Carla sat in the parish, trembling with exhaustion, transmitter sparking at her side. They're seeing it. All of them. He can't cover it anymore. Naya's grin was wolfish. Good. Now they'll starve with anger, not fear. Anne's eyes narrowed. Careful. Anger without bread burns too quickly. Jonah said nothing, watching the flames of fury spread across the city. The ledger lay open, the last entry still bleeding ink, bread behind gates. Silence buys half. Noise buys blood. Now the city had seen it for themselves. By noon, wardens opened fire on crowds in 3 districts. Not to kill, just to scatter. But blood was blood, and the scent of it mixed with hunger. Cole finally appeared on screen, his mask of calm cracked but not broken. Do not be deceived, he thundered. These images are lies, crafted by Mercer's insurgents. Bread is scarce because Mercer's chaos devours it. Order will feed those who obey. But obedience is the only ration. He held up a small iron disc stamped with the sunburst, the stability token. From this day, bread flows only through the token. No token, no loaf. Noise will not feed you. Silence will. The screens froze on the disc, shining like a coin of judgment. At the parish, the uproar was immediate. They starve us, then make us pay with obedience, a man shouted. They'll kill us one by one if we refuse, a woman sobbed. Carla slammed her hand on the altar. He's doubling down. Tokens are the leash. He'll starve anyone who refuses to kneel. Naya's face hardened. Then we tear the leash off. We take the bread. Jonah felt the ledger's weight in his hands. He opened it slowly, the pages whispering like dry leaves. He wrote. Rations as war. Bread turned to chains. Tokens as leash. He looked up at the parish, voices still clashing, eyes burning with fear. If bread is war, then we fight with truth. He claims scarcity. We show abundance. We take proof from his stores, and we bring it to the people. Carla's head jerked up. A raid? On a ration warehouse? Naya slammed her crutch into the floor. Finally. Something straight. Not bowls, not noise. Action. Anne's voice slid like steel. Dangerous. He expects anger. He expects riots. What he does not expect is precision. If we strike, we must do it clean, no martyrs, no chaos. Just proof. Jonah nodded. Then we plan for night. That night, the city simmered under curfew. Wardens patrolled in pairs, visors glowing faintly under floodlights. Families crouched in silence, clutching empty bowls like relics. In the parish, Carla hunched over maps, marking ration depots across the city. Red ink circled 3 warehouses stacked with crates confiscated from the markets. This one, she pointed, stabbing the map. South Barracks Depot. Guard rotation every 6 hours. Crates marked for emergency storage. If we can show they're full, not empty, Cole's scarcity-like collapses. Naya grinned, flexing her bruised knuckles. And if we take a few loaves with us, no one will complain. Anne's expression was cold. If we raid and fail, he burns 10 blocks. If we raid and succeed, he still burns, but with fear. Are you ready to carry that? Jonah placed the rook on the map. Steel bends to rust. Bread is rust. Tomorrow, we find his crack. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The rations war had begun. The South Barracks Depot squatted at the edge of the docks, a black rectangle of steel and wire. Floodlights swept in slow arcs, their glow cutting through mist that smelled of salt and rust. Wardens stood at each corner, rifles angled across their chests, visors gleaming like insects' eyes. Jonah crouched behind a rusted crane within, Carla, and Naya. The city behind them slept under curfew, but here, at the depot, night never slept. Carla adjusted the straps on her rig, whispering, camera lines run through the northeast tower. Cut them for 12 seconds before the backup kicks in. That's all the time we get. Anne's eyes scanned the patrol routes. 12 seconds buys entry. After that, we disappear or we burn. Nia grinned wolfishly, gripping her crutch like a weapon. 12 seconds is more than enough. Jonah's hand brushed the ledger under his coat. He felt the rook pressing through the fabric, sharp as bone. Steel bends to rust. Bread is rust. Tonight, they would test the truth of those words. Carla moved first, belly crawling under the shadow of the crane. She clipped a device onto the camera line, fingers trembling with precise urgency. A green light blinked once. Twice. Then went dark. Now, she hissed. And Jonah sprinted low across the yard, Nia limping fast behind them. For 12 heartbeats, the floodlights flickered blind. They reached the wall, pressed flat against cold steel. And slid a narrow blade from her coat, thin enough to fit a lock's throat. With 3 sharp twists, the padlock snapped. The gate swung open just wide enough for them to slip inside. As the lights blinked back, they melted into shadows between crates. Inside, the air was heavy with flour and yeast. Stacks of wooden crates towered like walls, each stenciled with emergency storage, for authorized distribution only. Carla whispered into her rig, recording. Every angle. Her drone zipped silently overhead, its lens sweeping across the mountain of food. Jonah pulled a crowbar from beneath his coat. He jammed it under a lid, wood splintering softly. The crate groaned open. Inside, loaves. Dozens. Wrapped in wax paper, golden crusts unbroken, the smell fresh as dawn. Nia's breath caught. God above, she reached in, fingers brushing bread. We could feed a block with this. Anne's voice was steady, almost cold. No. We don't take it. Not yet. We show it. Proof speaks louder than crumbs. Jonah stared at the loaves, anger pounding in his chest. Outside, families starved on half-loaves, bowls confiscated, children shot for noise. And here, mountains of bread, sealed and guarded. He closed the crate, hand shaking. Then he opened the ledger, scribbling fast. Bread behind gates. Enough for all. Withheld his leash. The ink bled black, deeper than ever. A shout split the silence. Who's there? Floodlight beams swept across the depot. Wardens, 2 of them, rifles raised. And moved like smoke, knife glinting. In one breath, she was behind the first soldier, her blade pressed to his visor seam. Quiet, she hissed. He froze, trembling. Nia lunged with her crutch, smashing into the second soldier's chest plate. He stumbled back, wind knocked out, rifle clattering across the floor. Carla's drone zipped higher, recording every second, the crates, the bread, the confrontation. Jonah stepped forward, ledger in hand, his voice low but unshaken. Tell me, how many crates here? How many starving out there? Which truth will you tell when the city sees? The warden's visor reflected Jonah's face, pale and furious. He said nothing. And pressed her blade deeper. Answer. The man's voice cracked. 2,000 loaves. Enough for a month. Orders say hold them until the city bends. Jonah's breath caught. And glanced at him, then back at the soldier. Now you understand why rust eats steel. Carla uploaded the footage on the spot. The drone's feed burst into every screen across the city, towers of bread, soldiers confessing, crates marked emergency. Families woke to see it. Mothers wept. Fathers raged. Children shouted through windows, enough for all. Bread behind gates. In the depot, alarms shrieked. Red lights blazed. More wardens poured in, rifles ready. And yanked Jonah toward the crates. Time's up. Nia swung her crutch, shattering a floodlight. Carla pulled wires from her rig, sparks flying. Jonah clutched the ledger to his chest, heart hammering. They had proof. They had truth. Now they needed escape. They sprinted for the gate, bullets cracking against steel. The rook dug into Jonah's palm, straight lines guiding his path. Behind them, the crates stood untouched but exposed, monuments to Cole's lie. By dawn, the city would know. The rations war was no longer rumor. It was blood. By dawn, the city had seen everything. Screens flickered in every quarter, not with Cole's calm face, but with Carla's splice, mountains of bread stacked in the South Barracks depot, wardens laughing, commanders grinding loaves under boots. The prisoner's trembling confession echoed across rooftops. 2,000 loaves. Enough for a month. Orders say hold them until the city bends. The words became a chorus, repeated in markets, whispered in alleys, shouted by children. Enough for a month. Enough for all. In the East Quarter, mothers stormed checkpoints with nothing but bowls in hand, demanding bread. Wardens shoved them back, rifles raised, but bowls clanged against steel until the sound drowned orders. In the South Docks, deserters ambushed a ration truck. They didn't take the bread, they opened the crates in the street, handing loaves to families while cameras streamed live. Children wept, clutching whole loaves as if they were holy relics. By midday, the city had changed. Hunger was no longer silence. Hunger had become fire. Cole appeared on screens before dusk, face pale but eyes blazing. No more mask of benevolence. His voice thundered with naked fury. You dare steal from stability? You dare take what order protects? Then you will choke on your theft. Behind him, soldiers wheeled in carts of bread loaves. Cameras zoomed close as wardens dipped them into barrels of black liquid, oil, ink, something thick and foul. Cole raised one soaked loaf in his hand, dripping sludge. This is chaos bread, he declared. This is what Mercer feeds you. Noise, corruption, poison. You eat only what stability gives, or you die with filth in your mouth. The screens froze on the image, bread blackened, dripping. In the parish, silence fell heavy. Families stared at the broadcast, some trembling, others cursing. Carla slammed her transmitter onto the altar. He's turning bread into a weapon. If he can't starve us, he'll make us fear what we eat. Naya's knuckles whitened on her crutch. Let me storm his depots. Let me drag his lies into the streets. Anne's voice was colder than iron. Storm, and he wins. He wants chaos, so he can call it poison. The more we burn, the more his lies ring true. Jonah opened the ledger with shaking hands. He wrote. Bread blackened. Poison painted as truth. Obedience as the only loaf. The ink bled deeper than ever, blotting the margin. That night, a rumor swept the city: poison loaves had been released into the streets. Some families refused bread, fearing death. Others fought for every crumb, willing to risk poison for hunger. Cole's gamble worked. Where hunger once united the city, now suspicion fractured it. Carla wept with rage, pulling at her hair. He's killing them without firing a shot. Starving them into fear of the only thing that keeps them alive. Jonah closed the ledger, hand trembling. Then we find the crack. He poisons with symbols. We fight with the same. Anne's gaze pierced him. Be careful, Jonah. Symbols cut both ways. Bread can be memory, or ash. By dawn, bowls no longer clanged in the streets. Instead, quiet shadows passed loaves hand to hand, each family whispering the same prayer: please let it be clean. The rations war had begun in fire. Now it settled into poison. And Jonah knew, Cole had not just starved their bellies. He had starved their trust. The parish air was heavy with smoke and whispers. Families huddled in pews, clutching their bowls, listening for rumors that might feed them. Children dozed against mothers' shoulders, thin and restless. Every hour, Carla's spliced footage replayed on cracked screens, wardens feasting, warehouses stacked with bread, Cole's face twisting in fury. But by now, Cole's poison had seeped deeper than hunger. Every loaf handed out in secret was met with suspicion. Families tore them in half before eating, staring at crumbs as if searching for black ink. Trust had become thinner than bread. And stood at the altar, gray coat buttoned high, her posture as rigid as a blade. Jonah watched her, knowing the silence that clung to her meant she was building towards something dangerous. Finally, she spoke. Cole owns the screens. Carla can splice, but only for moments before his stream crushes it. His voice fills every street. If we want to break him, we must poison his voice from within. Carla frowned, rubbing soot from her hands. And how do you suggest we do that? Hack his central broadcast hub? It's locked tighter than the depot. Anne's eyes never left Jonah. Not hack. Enter. Naya snorted, leaning on her crutch. You're insane. Walk into his jaws and hope he forgets to bite? But Anne's tone did not waver. They are taking prisoners every night. Marching them into the enclosures. Families, deserters, children. The wardens broadcast their confessions, their pleas. I can be among them. Jonah's chest tightened. You're asking to be captured. I am offering myself, and corrected. Captured is their word. Planted is mine. The knave erupted. Families begged her not to go. Deserters cursed. Even Carla, usually so precise, raised her voice. They'll kill you the moment they see through it. Anne's lips curved into the faintest smile. Then let them. A martyr's face on his stream is worth more than 10 crates of bread. Jonah slammed the ledger shut, the sound like a gavel. No. I won't write your name in blood because you walked into his hands. She turned toward him, gray eyes sharp. You already write in blood, Jonah. Every entry is a corpse. Every name a grave. The only difference is whether it matters. Naya's crutch cracked against the floor. Enough riddles, Anne. You want to die, fine, but don't drag us into it. Anne's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. I don't want to die. I want to be seen. His propaganda feeds on faces. The crying, the begging, the broken. What happens when one face refuses to break? When a prisoner looks into his camera and says his empire is a lie. Silence fell. Even the children in the pews leaned forward. Carla's voice broke it, quiet and trembling. You think he'll let you speak? And lifted her hands, palms still scarred from pulling the parish bell rope until they bled. He can gag me. He can cut me. But if I last one breath, one sentence, the city will hear it. And they will remember. Jonah rose from the altar, stepping toward her. The ledger felt like stone in his arms. You're gambling with your life. Her lips curved again, bitter and knowing. Everything we've done is a gamble. Bowls were gambles. Bells were gambles. Bread was a gamble. Now it is my turn. His voice cracked. And when they kill you, then you write me, and said simply. Not as martyr. As proof. The parish split down the middle. Half cried out for her to stay. Half whispered that maybe she was right, that only someone inside Cole's machine could crack it open. Carla stared at her transmitter as if hoping wires might strangle the idea. Naya paced furiously, muttering curses. Families held bowls like shields, terrified of what tomorrow would bring. Jonah felt the rook digging into his palm. Straight lines. No curves. But Anne was no line, she was the blade that cut across them. He opened the ledger slowly, the page trembling under his hand. He didn't write her name. Not yet. Instead, he wrote a single word. Gambit. The ink bled black. When he looked up, Anne's eyes glimmered like steel. Then it settled. That night, while the parish slept in uneasy silence, Jonah lay awake by candlelight. He imagined her face on Cole's screens, gray coat torn, hands bound, eyes unbroken. He imagined her words cutting through propaganda like lightning through storm clouds. And he imagined her blood. The ledger lay open beside him, the word gambit staring back. Jonah prayed it would not be the next grave he carved in ink. Anne's decision hung over the parish like smoke that refused to clear. The next evening, the nave glowed dimly with candles. Families whispered prayers, deserters sharpened knives, children stared wide-eyed at the woman who would walk into the jaws of stability. She stood at the altar, her gray coat buttoned, hair tied back, every motion deliberate, like a soldier preparing for parade. Carla fussed over her transmitter, voice shaking. "If you get close enough, if you can touch the feed line, just 1 second, in. I can amplify anything you say. But if they jam it," and silenced her with a hand on the shoulder. "Then you cut the feed. My death is not the story. My words are." Naya limped forward, slamming her crutch against the stone. "You don't get to play martyr. I've bled in every alley for this city. Don't think you're braver because you want to die on camera." Anne's gaze softened. "I'm not braver. Just chosen for this part. We each play our role. Yours is rage. Carla's is truth. Jonah's is memory. Mine is silence turned into voice." Jonah stepped closer, the ledger heavy in his arms. He wanted to beg her to stay, but the words strangled in his throat. He opened the book instead. The last entry, Gambit, stared back at him like a wound. And looked down at the page. "Don't write me yet." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Wait until I've spoken." Near midnight, they moved her toward the enclosure. She walked openly through the streets, no disguise, her steps echoing under floodlights. Wardens spotted her almost instantly. Shouts rang. Rifles raised. She did not run. She lifted her hands, palms scarred from the bell rope, and let them bind her wrists. Families watching from windows gasped. A woman clutched her child tighter. A man whispered, "Why doesn't she fight?" Jonah, hidden in the shadows with Carla and Naya, felt his chest seize as he watched the gray coat vanish into the blinding light of the enclosure gates. And did not look back. Back in the parish, silence reigned. Carla buried her face in her hands. Naya paced like a caged animal. Jonah sat with the ledger open, pen trembling over the page. But he didn't write. Not yet. Anne's gambit had begun. The broadcast began at dawn. Screens across the city flickered to life, normally filled with Cole's voice, his flawless silver bell tolling behind him. But today, the camera framed a new image, the inside of an interrogation chamber, walls washed in sterile white, a single chair bolted to the floor. And sat in it. Hands bound. Coat torn. A bruise darkened her temple, but her spine was straight, her gaze level. The announcer's voice rang out, flat and rehearsed. "Another agent of chaos has been captured. Another pawn of Mercer's lies will now confess." A soldier stepped into frame, visor gleaming, and barked, "State your crimes." Silence. And did not blink. Her eyes bored straight into the camera. Into the city. "I have no crimes," she said, voice steady. "Only truth." The soldier struck her across the face. Gasps rippled in streets and kitchens where families watched. Children clutched at bowls as if holding their breath. Blood smeared her lip. She licked it away, then spoke again, louder. "Your warehouses are full. Your soldiers eat while children starve. Your bell rings hollow. This city is not fed by stability. It is choked by it." Carla's transmitter hissed in the parish. Her hands shook as she forced the signal higher, amplifying every word. "Come on, and say it again, say it louder." The soldier struck her again, harder. She coughed blood but did not bend. "This is not chaos," and rasped. "This is memory. And memory does not die." Cole appeared then, stepping into frame, calm mask cracking at the edges. He stood over her, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You want to be remembered?" His voice was low, venomous. "You will be. As an example." He nodded. The screen went black. But the city had heard her. Every word. In the parish, silence fell. Then bowls began to ring, soft, steady, echoing her defiance. Jonah clutched the ledger, tears stinging his eyes. With trembling hands, he wrote. And spoke. Blood on her lips, truth in her eyes. Memory does not die. He closed the book, heart pounding. Her gambit had worked. But at what cost? The city buzzed with her words. Families repeated them in alleys, deserters etched them on walls, children whispered them like prayers before sleep. Your warehouses are full. Your bell rings hollow. Memory does not die. But by evening, Cole's voice returned to every screen. His calm mask had hardened into polished rage. You have seen a liar, he intoned. A woman trained by Mercer to spit chaos into your homes. You believe her because she bleeds. But chaos always bleeds. And order always survives. Behind him, the camera revealed and again. Bound to the same chair, but now lit from every angle, her bruises painted by shadow. Her silence looked rehearsed, framed as spectacle. Cole gestured toward her like a ringmaster. Tomorrow, you will witness her judgment. At noon, in the square, before the iron bell itself. The city will see what becomes of Chaos Tongue. The parish erupted in panic. Families sobbed, begging Jonah to rescue her. Deserters shouted to storm the enclosure that very night. Carla slammed her transmitter down. He's turning her into theater. A public execution, broadcast as lesson. Naya snarled, eyes burning. Then we break the stage before it starts. But Jonah stood frozen, ledger in his arms. His hand shook so hard the rook cut his palm. He saw Gannon's bloodied smile, the way her words pierced the screen. She had given them memory, but now she would be turned into warning. And had called it a gambit. And gambits always risked the queen. That night, Jonah wrote slowly in the ledger. Cole claims spectacle. And becomes stage. Tomorrow, the bell will toll judgment. He closed the book, the sound echoing like a verdict. Carla whispered, "What do we do, Jonah? We can't just watch." Jonah's gaze lifted, eyes hollow but sharp. We don't storm. We don't beg. We don't let him write her ending. We write it first. Naya gripped her crutch, feral grin breaking through. Then tomorrow, the square burns his script. Outside, the iron bell loomed in the square, floodlights washing its steel face. Crews hammered scaffolds together, building a stage beneath it. The city held its breath. Anne's gambit had carried her voice across every street. Tomorrow, her blood, or her defiance, would decide whether that voice endured. The morning of the parade arrived like a drumbeat. Even before dawn, the streets shook with boots. Wardens lined the avenues in perfect rows, armor gleaming, rifles angled skyward like iron branches. Trucks rolled past with banners draped over their sides, bright sunbursts stitched in gold, the emblem of stability. At the head of the column, the iron bell loomed, hauled on a massive cart pulled by chains. Its steel face caught the pale light, flawless, uncracked, a monument to Cole's promise, order is eternal. Families were herded from their homes, forced to stand along the streets. Children pressed against mothers' skirts, men clenched empty hands. All were ordered to watch. Screens lit up above rooftops. Cole's voice boomed like scripture. Today you see the strength of stability. You see the silence of order. You see the hand that feeds you. From the shadows of a ruined chapel, Jonah watched with Carla and Naya. The ledger was clutched tight in his arms. Naya spat into the dust. Parade. Call it what it is, a funeral march for the city. Carla's hands twitched over her transmitter, rage written on her face. If Anne's execution is tomorrow, this is the rehearsal. He's showing them what happens when you bend. Jonah's chest tightened. Every clang of the iron bell as it swayed on its cart felt like a nail in the city's coffin. Straight lines. No curves. And yet each line cut deeper. At the parade center, a unit of wardens marched in rhythm, carrying crates marked with the sunburst emblem. They held them high, displaying them like offerings. When the crates were opened, loaves of bread lay inside, each placed carefully on silver trays. Cole's voice thundered from every loudspeaker. See, there is bread for the faithful. Bread for the silent. Bread for stability. Families along the avenue wept, not with joy, but with rage buried so deep it barely showed. Mothers reached out empty hands, only to be shoved back by rifles. The bread was for display, not for them. Then it happened. From the back of the crowd, a cluster of children broke free. Barefoot, ragged, they carried bowls hidden under their coats. They slipped between soldiers, darted through legs, and before anyone could stop them, they knelt in the middle of the parade route. One by one, they pulled out their bowls and struck them against the stone. Clang! 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 The sound echoed across the avenue, cutting through the drum beats, cutting through Cole's voice, cutting through the bell itself. The parade faltered. Wardens froze. Their boots lost rhythm. The bread on silver trays shook. Cole's voice barked in fury, "Remove them! Silence the noise!" Soldiers rushed forward, rifles raised. But the children did not move. They struck again, louder. Clang! Clang! And from the sidewalks, families began to answer. Mothers lifted bowls, fathers banged tin cups, even the old struck canes against stone. The parade's perfect rhythm broke apart. The iron bell tolled once, but its note was drowned in the chorus of bowls. Jonah's breath caught in his throat. He gripped the ledger, hand trembling, and opened to a blank page. He wrote, "Parade broken." Children knelt. Bowls rang louder than the bell. Carla's eyes glistened with fury and awe. They're writing their own memory, Jonah. Without us. Naya grinned, feral and proud. That's what noise looks like. That's what fear sounds like when it dies. The moment shattered with a gunshot. A soldier fired into the air. Families screamed. Children ducked, but the bowls kept ringing, echoing against the avenue walls. Cole's voice roared, shaking the screens, "Noise is treason. This parade is order. Order will not be broken." But it already had. The parade of stability, perfect and flawless at dawn, now lay in ruins, its rhythm cracked, its silence filled with clanging bowls. By dusk, the story of the broken parade spread through every district. The Iron Hand had shown its strength, and the city had answered with defiance. And Jonah knew, Anne's execution tomorrow would not be a warning. It would be war. The parade did not end with silence. It ended in chaos. When the first gunshot cracked, wardens surged forward. Batons swung, rifle butts smashed, boots kicked children aside. Families scattered, bowls clattering across stone. The clangs turned frantic, not rhythmic, but they did not stop. From balconies, more bowls flew, hurled down like stones. A dozen struck soldiers, denting armor, shattering visors. The air filled with iron echoes, like the city itself was ringing against Cole's new bell. Cole's voice howled from the screens. "Noise is treason. Beat them back. Show them stability's hand." Wardens obeyed with brutal precision. Lines reformed, rifles pressed forward, shields locked. They forced families into alleys, drove children against walls. Screams mixed with clanging bowls, a storm of defiance and pain. But the iron bell, meant to crown the parade, hung silent on its cart. No matter how hard soldiers told it, its note vanished beneath the roar of bowls. Jonah and the others retreated into shadowed ruins. From there, Jonah scribbled into his ledger, hand shaking. Parade shattered. Bell silenced. Bowls turned weapons. Carla's transmitter hissed as she caught fragments of the clash, broadcasting it across every quarter. Screens showed not order, but wardens clubbing children, bowls flying like hail. The image burned itself into memory, not bread on silver trays, but bowls as shields and stones. By nightfall, the story of the broken parade had overtaken every whisper. Families told it in hushed awe, children kneeling with bowls, soldiers breaking rank, the iron bell drowned. For the first time, bowls were not just memory. They were weapons. Cole could call it treason. He could call it chaos. But the city had seen that even steel cracked when bowls rang together. And tomorrow, when and stood beneath the iron bell, that sound would not be forgotten. The night after the parade burned itself into memory, the city lay restless. Families whispered in darkened kitchens, bowls hidden under floorboards, children still mimicking the clangs that had drowned the iron bell. Cole's voice thundered through every screen, promising judgment. He swore that noise would be answered with fire. And the city believed him, because fire already glowed at the edges of the enclosures, torches burning through the dark. But the parish had a fire of its own. Carla unrolled her maps across the altar, her fingers stained with soot and wire burns. South Barracks again. They think we won't return so soon. Guard rotations are sloppy after the depot raid. We don't need to destroy the place, just show it. Jonah frowned, the ledger heavy in his lap. Show what? Carla stabbed her finger at the map. Their feast. Their crates. Their tables heavy with meat while children die in alleys. Last time, we caught glimpses. This time, we light it for the whole city to see. Naya's grin split her bruised face. She leaned on her crutch like a spear. And if fire's the only language Cole understands, then we'll write it in flames. Anne's absence was a shadow between them. Jonah felt it like a missing limb. But her words lingered, my death is not the story. My words are. He looked at Carla and Naya, both fierce in their resolve, and knew the city needed action as much as it needed memory. He opened the ledger, wrote a single line. Flame for truth, not for silence. Then he nodded. We move at midnight. The barracks rose from the docks like a fortress of corrugated steel. Floodlights swept lazy arcs, and inside, laughter spilled into the night. Wardens, drunk on stolen beer, their boots kicked high, their rifles slung forgotten. Carla's drone zipped overhead, lens recording every angle. Through it, Jonah saw long tables stacked with roasted meat, loaves split wide, pitchers brimming with ale. The bounty of conquest laid bare. Broadcasting now, Carla whispered, twisting wires into her rig. Screens across the city flickered. Families looked up from dark kitchens, and instead of Cole's sermons, they saw wardens gorging themselves, bread torn, broth slopped, songs shouted. Children gasped. Mothers wept. Fathers clenched fists. Cole's narrative cracked. Naya moved first, limping into the yard with her crutch strapped with oil-soaked rags. She smashed it against a torch, flame blooming bright. With a howl that echoed across the docks, she hurled it onto the barracks roof. The fire caught like dry tinder. Wardens scrambled, shouting, spilling their feasts. Laughter turned to panic. Jonah's breath seized. This was no longer just broadcast, it was war. Carla's voice trembled as she pushed the signal higher, feeding images of the burning barracks into every screen, soldiers scrambling, tables overturned, bread trampled under boots. Let them see it all, she whispered. The empire of fire they built. The empire of fire that will consume them. Jonah opened the ledger, his hand steady even as chaos erupted before him. He wrote. Flame rose. Bread trampled. Fire spoke louder than bell. Across the city, bowls rang again, not in rhythm, but in frenzy. Families shouted, their voices rising with the fire's glow. The broken parade had cracked Cole's silence. Now the burning barracks shattered it. And Jonah knew, Cole would answer this not with sermons. Not with tokens. But with war in the streets. By dawn, the city had already seen it, wardens drunk on meat and ale, the barracks lit like a funeral pyre, soldiers scrambling as fire swallowed their fortress. Cole's voice cut through the morning like a blade. Every screen flared with his face, pale with fury, eyes burning like coals. You mistake chaos for truth, he thundered. You mistake flames for justice. But fire does not feed you, it devours you. From this day forward, every street is under stability's hand. Every home is watched. Every bowl is suspect. Behind him, the iron bell loomed, its steel shining cold in floodlight. Cole raised his hand toward it, as if swearing an oath. Noise has become war. And war will be silenced by steel. In the parish, families trembled as they listened. Children clutched bowls to their chests, mothers whispered prayers. Deserters cursed, demanding retaliation. Naya slammed her crutch into the stone. He fears us. Fire showed his belly. That's why he roars. Carla shook her head, pale from exhaustion. No, he's done pretending. He's declaring martial law. The next blow will be blood, not words. Jonah sat in silence, the ledger open on his knees. He wrote. Cole names war. Steel rises. Bowles branded treason. He stared at the words until the ink bled heavy, as if the page itself strained under their weight. That night, wardens marched in double ranks through every quarter. Floodlights burned without pause. Families were pulled from their homes, bowls confiscated, ledgers of names rewritten with ruthless precision. The fire in the barracks had lit more than soldiers, it had lit the fuse of a citywide siege. And Jonah knew, chapter 3 had crossed its threshold. The iron hand no longer wore gloves. The fire had barely burned out when whispers slithered back into the city. At first, they came as rumors. Men in markets muttered of a new broadcast, not Cole's voice, not Carla's splice. Women in the parish swore they'd seen images flicker across alleyway walls, projected from nowhere. Children carried phrases on their lips that no one had taught them. The ledger speaks of fire. The ledger speaks of blood. The ledger speaks of the end. Jonah felt the rook in his pocket grow heavier with every whisper. That night, Carla pulled him aside, transmitter hissing with interference. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. Jonah, look. She tuned her rig until static gave way to an image. Not Cole. Not soldiers. A stage. Half-built, lit by guttering torches. And standing at its center, a young man with the rook tattoo bold on his wrist. The shadow. He smiled into the camera, calm as if he had never fled, never been exposed. You thought I was gone, he said softly. But memory cannot be killed. Not yours. Not mine. He held up a book. Leather-bound, edges frayed. The ledger. Or what looked like it. This, he declared, is the true record. The prophecies written long before Mercer's hand stained them. Do you want to know what it says? The camera panned across its pages. Words glowed in firelight. The boy with the bowl will fall. The bread will blacken. The barracks will burn. The crowd gasped. Every prophecy matched what had already happened. The shadow closed the book and smiled. And soon, the ledger speaks of more. Whose blood will fill the streets? Whose bell will crack next? Watch, and you will see. Jonah slammed the ledger he carried shut, breath ragged. He's forged it. Twisted it. Carla's voice was tight with fury. And people will believe it, Jonah. You saw the pages. They line up with everything we've lived through. He's writing your book before you can. Naya spat on the floor. Then we break him. Break his stage, break his bones, break his lies. Anne's absence pressed like a wound. Jonah wished she were here, her cold precision cutting through the chaos. But she was gone, her face in Cole's grip, her fate tied to the iron bell. All he had was the rook in his hand, straight lines no longer straight. By morning, the shadow's ledger spread like plague. Copies appeared on scraps of parchment, smuggled between markets, scrawled on walls in charcoal. Families whispered that maybe Jonah was never the true keeper. Maybe the real ledger had been hidden all along. Jonah walked through the parish, hearing his own words twisted in mouths of children. The ledger speaks of fire. The ledger speaks of death. He wanted to scream. Instead, he opened the real book, ink trembling in his pen, and wrote. Shadow forged a book. Prophecies stolen. Memory twisted into script. Carla collapsed beside him, rubbing her temples. If he convinces them this is real, Jonah, we lose everything. Coal doesn't need to kill us. The shadow will rot us from inside. Naya gripped her crutch like a weapon. Then we hunt him. We drag him into the light. Jonah stared at the ink bleeding across the page. The shadow's words echoed in his skull. The ledger speaks of more. For the first time, Jonah wondered, what if the shadow wasn't only lying? What if he had written the truth into lies so deep they could no longer be torn apart? The rook cut his palm. Straight lines. No curves. But the shadow lived in curves. And now, the city bent with him. The parish was no longer sanctuary. It was courtroom. Families pressed into the nave, bowls clutched like shields. Deserters stood along the walls, hands on knives. And at the center, Jonah Mercer, the ledger heavy in his hands, faced their stares. A woman rose first. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes aflame. The shadow's book spoke of the boy with the bowl. And he died, just as it said. Did you know? Did you hide it from us? Murmurs rippled. An old man jabbed a finger at Jonah. The shadow's book spoke of fire in the barracks. And it burned, just as it said. Is your ledger false? Has he held the truth all along? Children whispered among themselves, repeating lines they'd heard. The bread will blacken. The bell will toll. To them, prophecy sounded like magic. Jonah's throat tightened. He wanted to shout that the shadow had stolen, forged, twisted, but the weight of their hunger drowned his words before they left. Carla slammed her transmitter onto the altar, sparks flying. You fools! Don't you see? He's editing memory the way Cole edits screens. He writes what already happened and calls it prophecy. But the people's eyes slid back to Jonah, not Carla. They wanted his answer. He opened the real ledger. Pages ink-stained, scarred by names and events. He raised it high. This is memory, he said, voice rough. Not prophecy. Every word here bleeds from our streets, our bowls, our blood. It is no holy book. It is the record of what we endure. He held up the rook in his palm, cut into his skin. Blood welled. Straight lines. No curves. That is what we stand on. Not tricks. Not shadows. But the crowd's silence was heavy, undecided. Naya limped forward, fire in her eyes. You trust a man who hides in rafters? A thief who stole our pain and sold it back as theater? Jonah bled with you. He starves with you. Where is the shadow now? Laughing in his stage while you doubt the only man who stood in the open. Her voice rang across the nave like a bell. Some nodded, shame flickering. Others still looked uncertain, whispers crawling like snakes. Jonah closed the ledger, the sound sharp. He whispered, more to himself than them, he wants this. He wants me doubted. If memory cracks, he wins. That night, the parish did not sleep. Families argued in corners, deserters sharpened blades, children murmured the shadow's lines. Jonah sat alone with the ledger open, ink blotting the page. He wrote. Trust bends. Shadow sows doubt. Memory on trial. The rook cut deeper into his palm. And outside, the city bent with him. Jonah could not endure the whispers any longer. On the third night after the forged ledger appeared, he slipped into the alleys with Naya and Carla at his side. The rook dug into his palm like a compass, its sharp edges pointing him forward. Where are we even going? Carla hissed, transmitter strapped tight against her chest. Cole's patrols are everywhere. Jonah's jaw clenched. To the stage. To the shadow. If he wants to write our memory, I'll face him where he writes it. Naya's crutch thudded softly against the stones. About time. I've been itching to break his teeth since the scaffold. The trail wasn't hard to find. Graffiti spread across walls in chalk and coal, the rook symbol, scrawled crude but unmistakable. Arrows pointed deeper into the undercity, toward the abandoned rail tunnels where coal trains once ran. And from the tunnels, voices. Not whispers. Not arguments. Applause. they slipped closer, hiding behind broken girders. Jonah's breath caught. A stage had been built inside the cavern, cobbled from planks and draped in stolen banners. Torches smoked, casting light on rows of benches packed with civilians. Men, women, even children sat wrapped, bowls in their laps, eyes fixed on the figure at center stage. The shadow. He wore no mask now. The rook tattoo gleamed on his wrist. In his hands, the false ledger glowed in torchlight. His voice rolled smooth, theatrical. The ledger spoke of the boy with the bowl, and he fell. The ledger spoke of the bread blackened, and it came to pass. The ledger spoke of fire in the barracks, and you saw the flames with your own eyes. The crowd murmured, bowls clanging softly in rhythm. The shadow lifted the book high. And now, it speaks again, the iron bell will drink blood. A voice will break beneath it. Do you know whose voice? The crowd leaned forward. Children gasped. The woman they call in. Jonah's heart slammed against his ribs. His legs nearly buckled. Carla gripped his arm, face pale. He's turning her into prophecy. If she dies tomorrow under the bell, they'll believe him forever. Naya's teeth bared in a snarl. Then we kill him tonight. Jonah shook his head, eyes locked on the shadow. The rook in his palm cut deeper, blood slick. Not yet. If we strike here, we martyr him. He wants that. He wants memory to curve his way. Below, the crowd erupted in clanging bowls, chanting the shadow's words. The bell will drink blood. The ledger has spoken. Jonah's hands shook around the real book. For the first time, he felt its weight falter. Memory was no longer his alone. The night before Anne's execution, the parish did not sleep. Mothers rocked children who could not close their eyes. Deserters sharpened knives by candlelight. Bowls echoed in low, rhythmic clangs that carried no joy, only defiance. The air was thick with fear and resolve, braided so tightly it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Jonah sat alone at the altar, ledger open, staring at the words he had written hours earlier. And at the bell. Shadow with the book. Both lines converge. He whispered it again, as if repetition could carve it into truth. But behind him, whispers moved differently. Not words of defiance, words of doubt. A small group had gathered in the far corner of the nave. Faces Jonah knew, faces he had fed with his own hands, comforted with his own words. An older deserter named Roan spoke low, his voice gravel over stone. Every step since the ledger came into his hands, we've bled. Bowls shot from children's hands. Bread blackened. Barracks burning. And now Anne. Tomorrow she dies under the bell. All because of that book. A woman, thin as a shadow herself, nodded fiercely. The shadow's ledger predicts every step. His is prophecy. Mercer's is curse. Another man whispered, Cole says give him Mercer, give him the book, and the city lives. Maybe he's right. Maybe it's the only way. They thought Jonah could not hear them. But the nave carried sound like a drum. He did not rise. He did not shout. He closed the ledger softly, his hand trembling. But Carla had heard too. She stormed into their circle, transmitter slamming against the pew with a crack. Sparks spat like fireflies. You think handing him Jonah ends this? You think Cole spares you once he has the book? He'll burn you alive just to prove it was poison all along. Roan's jaw clenched. And what does your machine spare us? Noise? Screens? The shadow eats your tricks alive. At least with Cole, the rules are clear. Naya appeared then, crutch raised like a club. Say it again. I dare you. Say you'd give him up while he's still breathing in this room. The woman's lips curled. Better one man than 10,000. Better his blood than our children's. The parish fractured. Shouts erupted, bowls slammed. Some screamed to guard Jonah at all costs. Others hissed that the book was a curse, that Cole was right. Through it all, Jonah rose slowly, ledger in hand. He walked to the center of the nave, his shadow long in the candlelight. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. You think my blood ends this? You think giving him the ledger stops fire from burning? You think handing him memory makes him merciful? He lifted the book high. If this is curse, it is the curse of truth. If you would rather choke on lies, then hand me over. But know this, the day you give Cole memory is the day you give him your souls. The silence after was sharp as glass. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others looked away, eyes hard, unmoved. Ron muttered, tomorrow will decide. If Anne dies, the ledger dies with her. Then he and his circle slipped into the shadows, gone before anyone could stop them. Carla's hands shook. They'll betray us. They'll sell you before dawn. Naya slammed her crutch into the floor. Then let them try. I'll break their legs before they touch him. Jonah looked down at the rook in his palm, the blood dried dark in its grooves. Then he opened the ledger and wrote. Betrayal within. Doubt cuts deeper than steel. The ink bled heavy, darker than ever. And in the rafters above, unseen by all, a rook's symbol had been scratched into the wood. The shadow had already been there. The parish never truly slept, but sometime after midnight, the candles burned low and the clang of bowls faded to uneasy silence. That was when they moved. Roland and 3 deserters slipped from the shadows, blades glinting, eyes hollow with conviction. They crossed the nave like hunters stalking prey. At the altar, Jonah dozed against the ledger, exhaustion finally dragging him under. Carla's rig hummed faintly at his side, while Naya sat propped against a pillar, crutch across her lap. Ron's whisper was a hiss, take it. End this curse. One deserter crept forward, hand outstretched toward the ledger. Fingers brushed leather. And the book snapped shut. Jonah's eyes shot open, fierce with fire. His voice was hoarse but steady. So it's you. Naya was already on her feet, swinging her crutch. The first deserter crumpled, jaw broken. Carla's transmitter sparked alive, its whine piercing the nave like an alarm. Families stirred, gasps rising as they realized what was happening. Ron lunged at Jonah, knife raised. Jonah caught his wrist, the rook cutting into his palm as he forced the blade away. Blood smeared the hilt, their faces inches apart. You think Cole spares you? Jonah growled. He'll feed you to the fire the moment you kneel. Ron spat, teeth bared. Better is fire than your curse. The knife slipped, grazing Jonah's arm. Pain flared. But before Ron could drive deeper, Naya's crutch smashed across his ribs, sending him sprawling. The nave erupted. Families screamed, bowls clanged in panic. Some shouted to kill the traitors, others to bind them. The deserters fought like men possessed, convinced death in Cole's name was salvation. Carla hurled her rig against one attacker, wires sparking. He reeled, blinded by the flash. Jonah slammed the ledger into his chest, the weight of memory knocking him to the ground. Naya pinned Ron beneath her crutch, breath ragged, eyes blazing. Say mercy and I'll break slower. But Jonah's voice cut through the fury. No. Enough blood inside these walls. The traitors were dragged into the shadows, bound with rope. Families spat on them, curses thick with betrayal. Ron's eyes burned, unbroken even as blood trickled from his mouth. You think you've won, Mercer, he hissed. But tomorrow, under the iron bell, your book ends. Whether in Cole's hands or the shadows, it ends. Jonah stood over him, the ledger clutched tight, blood dripping from his palm onto its cover. He whispered, if it ends tomorrow, then let tomorrow decide. Not you. Later, alone at the altar, Jonah opened the book once more. His hand shook as he wrote. Betrayal struck. Blood nearly spilled. Memory survives, barely. The ink blurred with his blood. And still, the rook cut deeper. At dawn, the city awoke to silence. No clang of bowls, no whispers of rebellion, only the hum of screens as they flickered to life in every square, every alley, every home. Even the iron bell seemed to hold its breath. Cole's face filled the screens. Not the calm, fatherly mask he once wore. This was a face carved in stone, eyes burning, lips a thin, merciless line. My people, his voice boomed, iron steady, you have mistaken mercy for weakness. You have mistaken patience for surrender. But order does not bend. It does not yield. It does not laugh. Behind him, the iron bell loomed, gleaming in the floodlight. Soldiers flanked it like statues. And at its base, bound and bloodied, sat in. Her head bowed, hair matted with blood, but her spine still unbroken. Cole extended his hand toward the camera. Jonah Mercer hides among you, clutching the false ledger that poisons your minds. The shadow forges lies, and Mercer spreads them. Both are disease. Both must be cut out. His voice grew harder, every syllable like a hammer on steel. By nightfall, Mercer and his ledger will be delivered to me. If you hand him over, the city will be spared. If you do not. He paused, letting silence sink in like a blade. I will burn it. Every quarter. Every home. Until nothing remains but steel and ash. The screen froze on his face, eyes unblinking. The ultimatum had been spoken. The parish erupted in chaos. Families screamed, clutching their children. Deserters shouted over one another, some calling to hide Jonah, others demanding he surrender. Bowls clanged against pews until the nave shook. Carla slammed her transmitter onto the altar, sparks spitting. Don't you see? It's a bluff. He doesn't have the firepower to raise the entire city, he needs it alive to rule. A father shouted back, voice breaking. Bluff or not, can you risk my son's life? My daughter's? An old woman sobbed, clutching her bowl. Give him the boy. Give him the book. Let the rest of us live. Jonah stood at the center, ledger in his arms. His chest felt like stone, his voice hoarse from nights of shouting and ink. You think handing me over saves you, he said. He'll burn you anyway. He'll call it justice. He'll call it mercy. But fire is fire, no matter the name. Roan, bound in the shadows with his fellow traitors, sneered through split lips. At least we would burn slower. Naya lunged toward him, crutch raised, but Jonah lifted a hand. No. He speaks for many here. More than admit it. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Carla grabbed Jonah's sleeve, whispering fiercely. We can break his feet again. Show the city the barracks, the bread, the fire. Jonah shook his head. It won't matter. They've seen truth, but fear blinds faster than hunger. He opened the ledger, ink-stained fingers trembling, and wrote. Ultimatum. My life for the city. Fire promised. Trust fractured. The ink bled thick, smearing across the page. That night, the city split in two. In the East Quarter, bowls clanged in defiance, families shouting Jonah's name like a banner. We will not bend. In the South Docks, others whispered betrayal, promising to deliver him to Cole before nightfall. Soldiers moved through the streets, their boots echoing louder than the bowls. The city had become a balance scale, memory on one side, fire on the other. And Jonah Mercer, ledger in hand, was the weight tipping both. The parish had become a storm. Bowls slammed against stone, voices tore through the nave, curses and prayers mixing into one frantic chorus. Mothers wept, begging Jonah to give himself up. Deserters barked for blades, promising to defend him until the last man. Even children shouted, their small fists pounding pews as if the noise itself could decide his fate. Carla stood on the altar, voice raw from shouting. Cole lies. If we hand Jonah over, we sign our own death warrants. But for every nod of agreement, another voice rose in anger. A gaunt man cried out, then let him prove his loyalty. Let him save us with his blood. The words struck the crowd like a hammer. Some echoed them, desperate, while others recoiled in rage. Jonah stood at the center, ledger pressed tight to his chest. His heartbeat was louder than the bowls. He looked at faces he had fed, names he had written, lives he had carried in ink. And now those same faces begged for him to die. Naya shoved through the crowd, her crutch swinging like a weapon. Back off. He's not your lamb to slaughter. But Jonah lifted his hand. Enough. The room froze, the echo of bowls falling still. His voice was hoarse but unshaken. If my blood saves the city, then maybe it's worth it. If handing me over buys you another day, then maybe that's all memory can give. Carla's eyes widened with horror. Jonah, don't. He turned to her, softer now. How many more must bleed because of me? Anne. The boy with the bowl. The children in the parade. Maybe it ends if I walk into his hands. Silence stretched long. The parish seemed to lean toward him, torn between hope and despair. Naya's crutch struck the floor, the crack like thunder. Don't you dare. Don't you dare think dying for him is the same as saving us. You're not a lamb. You're the only voice we have left. Carla's transmitter sparked, her voice breaking. If you give him the book, Jonah, memory dies. Even if you live, even if the city survives, everything we've fought for turns to ash. Jonah looked down at the ledger. Bloodstains marred its cover. Ink bled across its pages. For a moment, it felt heavier than his own life. He opened it with trembling hands and wrote. I am the weight. If I fall, maybe the city rises. Or maybe it burns faster. He closed the book with a hollow thud. And in the silence that followed, the parish waited for him to choose. The parish slept fitfully, torn between hope and dread. But Jonah did not sleep. Near midnight, he rose from his corner of the nave. The ledger was strapped tight beneath his coat, the rook clutched in his bleeding palm. He moved silently, slipping between pews, careful not to wake the huddled families. His steps echoed faintly, like the toll of a muted bell. At the door, he paused. Beyond lay the streets, the checkpoints, the iron bell waiting for his blood. He whispered to himself, barely audible, let it end with me. He reached for the latch. Going somewhere? Carla's voice cracked the silence. She stepped from the shadows, transmitter strapped across her chest, eyes rimmed red from sleeplessness. Sparks hissed faintly from her rig, casting her face in broken light. Jonah's chest tightened. Carla, please. If I go, maybe he spares them. She shook her head, fury trembling in her voice. You think Cole keeps promises? He'll drag your corpse across every screen and burn us anyway. You're not saving us, you're handing him memory gift wrapped. A thud echoed behind Jonah. Naya limped into the nave, crutch striking stone with each step. Her face was shadowed, but her eyes burned. I told you not to dare, she growled. I'd rather break your legs than let you walk into his fire. Jonah turned, pain twisting his voice. You think I want this? I'm tired of their blood on my hands. Anne's. The boys. Every family begging me to die. If my life buys them peace. Naya cut him off, crutch slamming into the floor. Peace bought with lies isn't peace. It's chains. And you're not the only one bleeding, Jonah. We all are. Carla stepped closer, her voice softening. If you leave now, you don't end it. You erase it. Every clang, every fire, every word and spoke, it all dies the moment Cole holds your book. Jonah faltered. The ledger felt like lead under his coat, pulling him toward surrender. But their words cut deeper than steel. Finally, he sank to his knees, the rook slipping from his palm. Blood smeared across the stone. I can't carry this forever, he whispered. Naya crouched, resting her crutch against his shoulder. Then don't carry it alone. That's why we're here. Carla knelt too, placing her trembling hand over the ledger hidden in his coat. If memory is curse, it's our curse to share. Jonah closed his eyes. For the first time in days, his chest loosened. He opened the ledger and wrote with shaking hand. Tried to surrender. Stopped by hands of fire and wire. Memory shared. The ink smeared, blurred with tears. When he looked up, both women were still beside him. And in their eyes, he saw not just burden, but defiance strong enough to burn. The city moved as one body that morning. Floodlights snapped on before dawn, cutting through the mist. Wardens stormed through every quarter, banging on doors, dragging families into the streets. Bowls were confiscated again, clanging against the stone as they were tossed into piles. Mothers clutched their children, fathers bowed their heads, old men shuffled with trembling hands raised. Square, the soldiers barked. To the square. The river of bodies flowed through alleys, pressed tight by rifles and steel. Fear clung to every breath. Even the air tasted of iron. At the heart of the city, the square waited, paved with black stone, surrounded by towers bristling with loudspeakers and screens. And in the center, suspended on chains thick as tree trunks, loomed the iron bell. Its face gleamed under floodlight, perfect and unbroken, the symbol of Cole's order. Beneath it stood a scaffold. And upon that scaffold knelt Anne. Her gray coat was gone, stripped away. Her wrists were bound, her hair matted with blood, her lips split. Yet her spine was straight, her eyes sharp even through swelling. She did not bow her head. Cole stood beside her, clad in a black coat with the sunburst emblem stitched across the chest. His voice rolled across the square, amplified by 1,000 speakers. People of stability, he thundered, you have seen your city twisted by liars. You have seen fire in the barracks, chaos in the streets, bowls ringing like treason. And you have seen this woman, this voice of Mercer, spit poison into your homes. He seized Anne's hair, forcing her face up toward the crowd. Her eyes blazed, unbroken. Noise will not save you, Cole declared. Order will. Today, order rings the bell. Jonah pressed forward in the crowd, Carla at his side, Naya behind him, crutch hidden beneath her cloak. The ledger throbbed heavy under his coat, the rook cutting into his palm like a brand. Carla whispered, transmitter wires coiled in her hands. I can splice into the feed when he gives the signal. But only seconds, then they'll cut me. Naya muttered, teeth clenched. Seconds is all I need. Jonah's breath shook. The square was suffocating, packed with families pressed shoulder to shoulder, fear shimmering like heat. All eyes were on Anne, bound beneath the iron bell. The shadow's prophecy hissed in his skull, the bell will drink blood. The woman's voice will break. If she died here, if her blood fell on the stone, the shadow's ledger would become truth. And memory would be his. Jonah whispered to himself, to the book pressed against his ribs, not prophecy. Not his. Cole raised his hand. The square fell silent. Not even the wind dared to move. Noise ends here, he said. Bowls end here. Memory ends here. And in their place, stability eternal. He gestured to the executioner, a warden clad in steel from head to toe, holding the great mallet meant to strike the iron bell. With one swing, the sound would crash across the city, and Anne's blood would follow. The crowd held its breath. Carla's fingers danced over her rig. Sparks hissed. Say the word, Jonah. Naya shifted, her crutch braced like a spear. Jonah felt the rook dig deeper into his palm. He opened the ledger with trembling hands, ink and blood smearing together, and wrote. The square of silence. Bell raised. One voice left to break. Then he looked at Carla. Now. The screens flickered. Cole's face glitched, his voice warped. And then, Anne's voice, raw but unbroken, cut through. This city is not silent. This city remembers. Gasps ripped through the crowd. Bowls hidden under cloaks were raised high, clanged against stone. The sound started soft, scattered, but grew, swelling into a chorus that drowned even the iron bell. Cole roared in fury. Silence them. Wardens surged forward, rifles raised, batons swinging. But the bowls would not stop. The square was no longer silent. It rang with memory. The square shattered. Anne's words still echoed, this city remembers. When the bowls thundered louder than gunfire. Families slammed them on stone, deserters raised them like shields, children clanged them with wild defiance. The iron bell loomed overhead, but its voice was lost in the storm of memory. Cole's fury cut through the din, strike them down. Wardens surged into the crowd, black armor glinting, rifles cracking. The first shots split the air, families screamed, but even as bodies fell, the bowls kept ringing. Noise spread like wildfire, leaping from corner to corner until the square was alive with defiance. Jonah shoved forward, ledger pressed to his chest. Naya swung her crutch like a weapon, knocking a soldier to the ground, steel cracking against visor. Carla dragged her rig through the crush of bodies, sparks flaring as she forced the feed to stay open. Screens across the city still flickered with Anne's defiance, her face bruised but unbroken. "Noise is not chaos," she cried into the storm. "Noise is life." Every clang of a bowl hammered the words deeper. A warden lunged at Jonah, blade flashing. Jonah barely dodged, the edge tearing across his coat. He stumbled, nearly losing the ledger. Panic clawed at him. If the book fell here, if Cole's hand seized it, memory was gone. Naya's crutch swung, shattering the soldier's knee. He screamed, collapsing into the press of bodies. Naya hauled Jonah upright, teeth bared. "Hold it tighter. You drop that book, we're already dead." Jonah nodded, breath ragged, rook carving blood into his palm. On the scaffold, Cole's voice roared above the chaos. "End it now! Ring the bell!" The executioner lifted the mallet, muscles straining, ready to bring it down. And drew a breath, blood trailing her chin, and shouted again, not to Cole, not to the wardens, but to the crowd. "Remember the boy. Remember the bread. Remember the fire." The bowls answered, 1,000 iron voices striking as one. The mallet wavered. The warden's hands trembled. For the first time, even steel seemed to hesitate. Jonah shoved forward, eyes locked on the scaffold. His ledger shook in his hands, ink bleeding across the page as he scrawled. Bell raised. Bowls answered. Steel hesitates. The words blurred with sweat and blood. Carla shouted over the din, sparks flying from her rig. "We're buying seconds, Jonah. What do we do with them?" Jonah's chest heaved. All around him, noise crashed like waves, iron and memory colliding with steel. For the first time, he felt the city riding with him. The executioner raised the mallet high. Floodlights blazed, rifles leveled, the city held its breath. Cole stood at the scaffold's edge, eyes burning with triumph. "Now," he roared. "Ring the bell. Drown their noise." The mallet swung down. But before it struck, a bowl flew from the crowd, hurled by a child's hand. It clanged against the iron bell with a shriek of defiance. The sound cracked through the square like lightning. Not the solemn toll Cole demanded, but a crooked, jagged noise, chaotic, human, alive. The mallet slammed after, but instead of resonance, the bell shuddered. A fracture, hairline but real, raced across its steel face. Gasps tore from the crowd. Then bowls rose everywhere, hurled against the bell. 1, 2, 10, 100, clang after clang until the square thundered with defiance. The iron bell trembled under the storm. And with a final groan, it split. Steel screamed as the great bell cracked open, shards raining down onto the scaffold. Cole staggered back, fury twisting into shock. And collapsed to her knees, chains snapping loose under the tremor. She dragged herself upright, face bloodied, voice raw, and shouted with everything she had left. "The bell is broken. But the city still rings." The words echoed across the square, carried on 1,000 bowls. Jonah felt the ledger burning in his hands. He tore it open, ink bleeding as his pen scrawled. Iron bell broken. Noise became thunder. Memory louder than steel. Tears blurred the page, but he wrote until the ink carved grooves into the parchment. Carla screamed over the din, sparks leaping from her rig. "It's live. Every screen is showing this. The whole city sees." Naya swung her crutch, shattering another visor, and bellowed, "Look, Jonah. Even steel bleeds when you strike it enough. The square was no longer silent. It was riot, it was resurrection, it was memory clawing itself free. Families surged against wardens, deserters wrested rifles from armored hands, bowls clanged like war drums. Cole's voice tried to rise above it, but it drowned in the thunder. His empire of silence cracked like the bell itself. Jonah stood in the chaos, the rook bleeding in his palm, ledger heavy against his chest. For the first time, he felt not cursed by memory but carried by it, thousands of voices writing with him, bowls as their ink, the broken bell as their proof. He closed the book with finality. Chapter 3 ended not with silence, but with thunder.